You chained my body, not my will.
You know that moment when you wake up and life feels normal for 2 seconds before it all comes crashing in? Yeah, that was me. Right up until I felt cheap polyester on my cheek and remembered I was tied to a motel bed like some cut-rate kink fantasy gone bad. The rope wasn't even real rope. Looked like clothesline from Dollar General. Classic Harper. Always saving a buck even when stabbing me in the back. I'll give her this, though. The knots were solid. My hands were going numb while their laughs echoed in my head like a pinball machine from hell. Harper's screechy cackle, Bianca's honking snort laugh that made you wonder if she'd been dropped as a baby, and Tess's weird giggle that always sounded stoned. "Good luck, Owen." Bianca had yelled before the door slammed, her voice trailing off with knee-slapping joy like this was peak comedy. The motel door rattled the walls like the whole place was held together with duct tape and prayers. Then I heard the real punchline, my own truck roaring to life in the lot. My truck, the one I'd been paying off for 3 years. Gone with my gym bag and the 40 bucks in quarters I'd been saving for laundry. I pulled and twisted until my wrists burned, trying to Houdini my way out, but Harper had always been weirdly good with her hands, just never in ways that helped me. The rope dug deeper, carving lines that would last longer than my marriage. The room stank of bleach and fake pine spray that had never fooled a soul. The carpet looked like it had fought 3 wars and lost all of them, every stain its own crime scene. An old TV played a soap opera on mute. Perfect. Even the universe was mocking me with quiet drama while I lived my own loud mess. After forever, longer than the extended Lord of the Rings, I freed one hand. And that's when it hit me like bad gas station sushi. I wasn't just stuck in a sleazy motel. I was stuck 900 miles from home. I'd overheard them before they spiked my drink last night. My sweet wife and her sisters had plotted every step. The fake romantic trip, the "let's spice things up" line, the mystery cocktails mixed like a science project. They took it all. My wallet, cards, the 37 bucks in cash, my passport, since Harper had teased about driving to Canada, even my shoes. Seriously, who steals shoes? That's Old Testament level cruel. I peeked out the window in just my socks. My truck was gone. Only a rusty van sat in the lot and a raccoon by the dumpster having some kind of breakdown. No Harper, no Bianca, no Tess, no help. At the front desk, the clerk looked like he'd been carved out of bologna and cured in smoke for 40 years. His tag said Darren, but his vibe was pure DMV on its worst day. I explained my sorry tale with all the grace a man can while looking like a dumped stray. He just stared at me like I'd asked for a kidney. "No ID, no service," he muttered, eyes still on his phone. Probably Candy Crush. Motel policy, at a place that clearly rented rooms by the hour and had more health code sins than a gas station hot dog roller. I sat in that lobby what felt like half my life, watching people come and go like I was part of the furniture. Truckers, couples who couldn't keep their hands off each other, business folks who looked half dead. Nobody really saw me. I was just another sad part of the lobby. That's when I spotted him, a guy in coveralls walking toward a delivery truck. Big man, maybe in his 50s, with a face that said he'd been through plenty, but hadn't let it sour him. The side of the truck read, "Vince's Deliveries." I walked up in my socks, trying not to sound like I'd just broken out of a bad movie. "You wouldn't be heading anywhere that's not here, would you?" Vince gave me a once-over, taking in my sock feet and the look of a man whose life just blew up. Instead of calling for help, he nodded back at the motel. "Rough night?" "Rough year," I said. Then I spilled it all. My wife, her sisters, the prank, stranded, broke, shoeless, stripped of what little pride I had left. Vince listened, quiet, nodding here and there. When I was done, he reached in his truck and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil. Turkey and cheese. Smelled like heaven. "Rule 1, he said, handing it over. "You can't think on an empty gut. Rule 2, sometimes the world puts you right where you need to be, even when it feels like the worst place." On the 300-mile ride north, most of it quiet, I called the one person who might get it. Uncle Raymond, my dad's younger brother. Never married, lived in some fishing town, always seemed at peace. "Uncle Ray, it's Owen. I need a place to crash. Long story." Hardly a pause. "Always room for family, son." Always. Raymond's farmhouse looked like it had grown right out of the earth. Solid wood, real paint, none of it peeling. The porch wrapped around like open arms, rocking chairs worn from use. He showed me the guest room with no fuss. Just Bathrooms down the hall, towels in the closet, sleep as long as you need. No questions, no digging, just straight facts and the grace to rest. A few days later, Raymond sat with 2 mugs of coffee and a folded envelope. "Found some things you might need," he said, like it was coupons, not a lifeline. Inside was cash, enough to breathe again, a driver's license with my photo, but the name Owen Rourke and Raymond's address, and a phone number, Jeb Morrison. Mechanic. Friend. Needs help. Won't ask about your past. "Why?" I asked. "Why do all this?" Raymond looked out at the yard where fireflies blinked like broken stars. "Because everyone deserves a shot at who they're meant to be. Sometimes that means walking away from who they were." Jeb's garage looked like it was built in the 50s and hadn't been fixed up since the 70s. The kind of place where the coffee could peel paint, the radio never left classic rock, and the air tasted like motor oil mixed with sweat and hope. Walking through those bay doors felt like coming home. Jeb Morrison was just what you'd picture. Late 60s, built solid like a fire hydrant, hands worn to leather, mustache straight out of history. He tossed me coveralls with Pete stitched on the chest. Pete moved to Florida to die. His clothes might as well earn their keep. The work was just what I needed. Oil changes on trucks more rust than paint, brake jobs on vans that had hauled kids by the dozen, transmissions on cars that should have been junked years ago. I sank into the rhythm like pulling on old boots. My hands still knew how to coax life out of dead engines. The other guys accepted me without question. Billy pushing 60 but claiming 39, Tommy fresh from high school and convinced YouTube made him an expert, and Marcus who could diagnose problems by listening. Within a week, I was just Owen, the new guy good with transmissions who didn't complain when the ancient coffee maker produced something resembling motor oil. 3 weeks in, this guy came stumbling through the bay doors like he'd been running a marathon through hell. Tall, 30s, dark hair, face that suggested he'd seen things he'd rather forget. But what caught my attention was his shirt soaked in crimson red. "Jesus," Billy said, dropping his wrench. "Jeb, we got a situation." The guy, Callum I'd learn later, was trying to stay upright, but failing. One hand pressed against his side, crimson red seeping through his fingers. "Got jumped outside of town," he managed. "They took my car." I grabbed a clean rag and moved toward him. "Here, let me take a look." He looked like he was deciding whether to trust me or run, but whatever he saw in my face convinced him. The wound was deep, but not immediately life-threatening if we could stop the bleeding. "What's your name?" I asked, keeping him talking. "Callum Brooks," he said, wincing as I applied pressure. "Owen Rourke," I said. "You're gonna be fine." The paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, and just like that, he was gone, leaving bloodstains on concrete and a story that would become local legend. A couple days later, he came back, looking better than when he'd stumbled bleeding through our doors. "Wanted to thank you," he said. "Paramedics said you probably saved my life. Just did what anyone would do." "Not everyone would," he said, and something in his voice suggested experience with people who wouldn't. That's when he asked if he could buy me coffee. We sat on overturned milk crates, drinking coffee that could strip paint, and that was the beginning of something I couldn't have predicted. During a storm weeks later, Callum showed up at Raymond's soaked to the bone, walking through sideways rain like it was a casual evening stroll. We sat drinking coffee while lightning turned the windows into strobe lights, and that's when he told me his story. "I used to be a cop," he said. "Narcotics detective in the city. Had a partner, Martinez. Trusted him like family." His expression went dark. "Turns out Martinez was dirty, taking money from dealers, tipping them off about raids. But he was smart, made sure I looked dirty when things went sideways. When Internal Affairs investigated, Martinez fed them a fabricated story with evidence and witnesses. They couldn't prove I was dirty in court, but couldn't prove I wasn't either. Got the kind of retirement they give cops who might be crooked but aren't worth prosecuting. Lost my badge, pension, reputation. Martinez got promoted 6 months later." "That's why you didn't seem surprised when those guys jumped you," I said. "You're used to people trying to destroy your life." "Spent about a year feeling sorry for myself," he continued. Then realized the person I'd been, the cop who believed the system worked, who trusted his partner, that person was gone. So I could either mourn him forever or figure out who I was supposed to be. "They erased Detective Rivera," he said, standing to leave, "but they couldn't erase who I really am. Turns out that guy's a lot tougher than the cop ever was." Home invasion came months later. I found Raymond's back door hanging open, not kicked in, but just ajar, like someone had politely forgotten to close it. The house looked normal, too normal, but Raymond's desk drawer was pulled out 6 inches. The emergency cash envelope was gone, about $300, but everything else remained. Checkbook, spare keys, even his mother's jewelry box. When Callum arrived and assessed the scene, his cop instincts kicked in. This isn't random. Random thieves don't know where people keep emergency cash and don't leave behind jewelry and electronics. Someone's looking for you specifically. He turned into a one-man security installation crew, returning with enough hardware to secure a small bank. New locks that could stop a rhino, motion sensor lights visible from space, camera system feeding to his phone app. Sometimes, Raymond said while we worked on the dock later, the people who come back for you don't want you. They want control. 7 years passed. 7 years of honest work, quiet evenings on Raymond's porch, friendship with someone who understood betrayal. 7 years of peace, or close enough that I'd almost started believing it might last. The knock came on a Tuesday evening during rain that had a personal vendetta against anything not already underwater. I opened the door expecting a lost tourist or broken-down motorist. It was Harper. She looked older. 7 years will do that. Thinner, like she'd been living on stress and cigarettes. Shorter, darker hair, styled expensively, but definitely her. For about 2 seconds she smiled, the real smile that had made me think I was lucky back when I was young and stupid. But then her eyes shifted past me, and her smile vanished like someone had unplugged it. I turned to see Callum standing in the hallway, not moving, not speaking, just there. Solid, calm, completely unimpressed by whatever drama was about to unfold. "Can we talk?" Harper asked. Same voice, same slight southern accent, same tone suggesting whatever she wanted was obviously important. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door. The rain kept us mostly dry under the roof. "Hello, Harper." "Been a while." "I know this is unexpected," she said, looking uncomfortable. "I tried to find you after everything, but you just disappeared. Funny how that works when someone abandons you in the middle of nowhere with no money and no ID. Disappearing becomes a survival skill. I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed harshly. "Harper, angry is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. What I felt after your little prank was something a lot more complicated." She looked down. "No wedding ring," I noticed. "I left them, Bianca and Tessa. We don't talk anymore." "Good for you." "Should have done that years ago." "I saw a video online. Bianca was on some podcast bragging about what we did to you like it was the funniest thing ever. It went viral, millions of views. People were outraged, called us monsters, said what we did was criminal." So that explained how she'd found me. Public shame had finally given Harper a conscience, apparently. "I've been looking for you for 3 years," she continued, "ever since I realized what I'd lost." "What you'd lost?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Harper, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. There's a difference. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I want to make it right." "Make it right? You gonna build me a time machine so I can go back and not waste 8 years married to someone who thought I was a joke? I thought maybe we could try again. I know it sounds crazy, but I've changed. I'm not the same person I was then." I stared at this ghost from my previous life, taking in the expensive haircut and designer jacket. Maybe she had changed, but it didn't matter. "Harper, I'm not the same person either. And the person I am now doesn't want anything to do with the person you used to be, are now or might become in the future." She looked past me toward the door. "Is it him? Is there someone else?" "It's not about someone else. It's about me, the person I became after you left me tied to that bed. I didn't tie you up. That was Bianca. I told her it was too much. You were there. You watched. You laughed. You took my wallet and shoes and left me there like trash." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I've regretted it every day." "Good. You should regret it. But your regret doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo what you did, and it doesn't make me the kind of person who takes people back after they've shown me exactly who they are." The rain was letting up. "I loved you," Harper said, voice breaking. "I still love you." "No," I said with surprising certainty. "You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone who would take whatever you dished out and ask for more. You loved having a husband who made you feel superior and gave your sister someone to make fun of? That's not true. It is true, and we both know it. The only difference is, I finally figured it out. She glanced toward the door one more time. He seems nice. He is. He's also not someone who would ever tie me to a bed and drive away laughing. Harper flinched like I'd slapped her. I should go. Yeah, you should. She walked to a car I didn't recognize, something foreign and sleek, and drove away into the night. When I went back inside, Callum was reading like nothing had happened. You okay? He asked without looking up. Yeah, I said, surprised I meant it. Whatever power Harper had once held over me was gone. She'd come expecting to find the same guy she'd left tied up, someone who'd be grateful for any attention. Instead, she found someone else entirely, someone who didn't need her approval, love, or regret, someone who'd built a life that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with becoming who he was supposed to be. 8 months later, I testified in court. Bianca and Tessa had pranked another sufferer who ended up hospitalized with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. The prosecutor had tracked me down through that viral video where Bianca bragged about their crimes. Sitting in that courtroom, watching them try to look respectable in expensive clothes, I felt unexpected pity. Not for their situation, they'd earned every bit of trouble, but for the fact that they'd never learned other people weren't put on earth for their amusement. When they called me to testify, I walked to that witness stand feeling like I was representing every person who'd ever been someone else's punchline. I told them everything. Not just that night, but the years of systematic humiliation leading up to it. It wasn't just that night, I said, looking directly at the jury. That was the final insult after years of smaller ones. Years of being treated like my only purpose was to make them feel better about themselves. The courtroom went quiet in a way that felt different from normal quiet. This was the silence that happens when people hear something true and ugly, something that makes them uncomfortable because they recognize it. When the defense attorney suggested it was just harmless fun between family, I looked at the jury again. There's nothing harmless about systematically destroying someone's sense of self-worth for entertainment. They got convicted. Harper wasn't charged. She distanced herself before the recent incident, but justice felt good anyway. 7 years ago, they tried to erase me, turn me into a punchline. Instead, they freed me to become who I was supposed to be. The man sitting in that courtroom belonged to himself now, and that's exactly where he intended to stay.
You made your choice. Now watch me erase you.
I'm a 36-year-old contractor who just landed the Kellerman project, a full-scale, ground-up commercial renovation worth more than I'd managed to earn in the last 2 years combined. We're talking about life-changing money here, the kind that clears every truck payment, wipes out old debts, funds a college education without blinking, and maybe even buys you that cabin by the lake you've been picturing in your head since you were young enough and naive enough to think 30 was old. The kind of windfall that makes you stand a little straighter, talk a little louder, and start to believe you've finally arrived. I was cruising down Maple Street in my dented, paint-flecked F-150, the kind of truck that rattles when you push it past 50, windows down to let in the warm afternoon air. The scent of fresh-cut grass drifted in from the houses I passed, mixing with the faint smell of motor oil and dust that lived in my cab. Classic rock thundered through the speakers, bass vibrating in my chest, and I felt like I could take on the world. In my head, I was already rehearsing my victory speech to Marissa. Baby, we did it. Your husband just became a legitimate businessman. I even caught myself picturing the look on her face when I told her. Hell, I almost pulled over to that fancy wine shop downtown, the one where a single bottle costs more than a week's worth of groceries. Because tonight wasn't just going to be a good night. Tonight was going to be one for the history books. Turns out I was a damn fool. I turned into our driveway, the one I'd been faithfully making mortgage payments on for 8 years, and my brain slammed to a stop. You know that exact moment in a horror movie when the music dips into that slow, heavy rhythm and you can feel something bad coming before you even see it? That's what this was. Except there was no masked killer waiting for me. What I got was worse. Reality, raw and sharp enough to cut. Black garbage bags, not one, not two. An entire grim parade of them lined in a perfect row along our pristine white picket fence like some cruel, mocking celebration. And these weren't the flimsy kitchen bags you pick up at the store. No, these were heavy-duty, contractor-grade sacks. The expensive kind that can carry the broken remains of a bathroom without tearing. Every single one bulged to the point of splitting, seams stretched thin. I saw the frayed sleeve of my old Carhartt jacket sticking out from one, the worn spine of my favorite Stephen King novel peeking from another. One bag was packed with my tools, and a man's tools aren't just tools. They're history. They're hours of work, sweat, and muscle memory. You don't throw them into trash bags unless you're sending a message that could be seen from space. But even that wasn't the hardest hit. The worst part was standing behind them, Marissa, my wife of 8 years, the woman I had promised to love, honor, and, apparently, provide with complimentary refuse services. She was wearing her navy blue power suit, the one she reserved for big court appearances, her red hair pulled back into that sharp, unforgiving bun that always meant she was here to win, no matter the cost. And next to her, standing too close, way too close, was a man I'd never seen before but instantly disliked down to my bones. Picture every slick, morally flexible lawyer from every movie you've ever watched, roll them into one, then dress him in a suit worth more than my truck. His hair was so precisely slicked back it looked like it could repel rain. A Rolex winked on his wrist, and his smile had the exact cold calculation of a shark closing in on a wounded seal. His hand rested casually but deliberately on the small of her back, the universal "this is mine now" gesture that men like him probably learn the same way they learn how to order $1,000 bottles of champagne. As my truck crunched to a stop on the gravel, Marissa looked up at me. For half a second, there was a flicker in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe hesitation. But if it was there, it vanished almost instantly, replaced by a look that was more like mild annoyance that I'd shown up before her little display was complete. Then she tilted her head, that courtroom move she used before she tore someone's argument to pieces, and delivered the sentence that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. I've upgraded. I can't live with the loser anymore. Just like that. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of building a life together, 8 years of me busting my A to give her everything she wanted, and she summed it all up like I was a smartphone she was trading in for a newer model. The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before a tornado hits, that weird, heavy quiet where even the birds know something bad's about to happen. Mr. Expensive Suit was practically vibrating with smugness, probably expecting me to lose my mind, maybe throw a punch, definitely make a scene that would give them both something to laugh about later. But you know what I did instead? I laughed. Not a bitter, crazy laugh or a fake trying to save face laugh. A genuine, this is so ridiculous it's actually funny laugh that started in my chest and worked its way up until I was damn near doubling over. Both of them just stared at me like I'd started speaking in tongues. Marissa's confident smirk flickered for just a second, and I caught a glimpse of the woman I'd married. The one who used to think my laugh was contagious, who used to curl up next to me on Sunday mornings and say I made her feel safe. But that woman was apparently long gone, buried under designer clothes and corporate ambition. So I did the only thing that made sense. I got out of my truck, walked around to the back, and popped the tailgate. The metallic clang echoed in the evening air like a starting bell. Without saying a word, not one damn word, I started loading those garbage bags into my truck bed. My clothes, my books, my tools, pieces of the life I thought we'd built together. Each bag felt heavier than it should have, not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented. 8 years of thinking I knew someone. 8 years of believing that love was supposed to be about sticking together through thick and thin, not upgrading when someone better came along. The whole time they just watched. Marissa kept opening her mouth like she wanted to say something, but what was there to say? Sorry for destroying our marriage? Hope you find someone who appreciates having their life stuffed into trash bags. Thanks for making this so easy by not fighting back. When the last bag was loaded and the tailgate was closed, I got back in my truck, cranked the engine, and put it in reverse. Still hadn't said a single word. Still hadn't given them the satisfaction of seeing me break down or beg or make promises about changing or being better. As I backed out of that driveway, my driveway that I'd been paying for, I caught one last look at them in my rearview mirror. Mr. Upgrade had his arm around Marissa's shoulders now, probably whispering sweet nothings about how much better her life was going to be without me dragging her down. And you know what? Maybe he was right. Maybe she would be better off with someone who could give her the country club lifestyle she'd been wanting, someone who looked good at fancy dinner parties, someone who didn't come home with sawdust in his hair and calluses on his hands. But as I drove away from the house I'd called home for 8 years, past the mailbox I'd installed myself, Past the garden where I'd helped her plant those damn roses she was so proud of, I realized something that would have shocked the hell out of both of them. I felt free for the first time in longer than I could remember. I felt like I could breathe again. Here's the backstory because this didn't happen overnight. Marissa's a lawyer. When we met in 2016, I was 28 and cocky as hell, running my own construction company built from nothing but a borrowed truck and more determination than sense. She was 26, fresh out of law school, working as a junior associate at one of those fancy downtown firms where they charge $500 an hour to tell you what you already know. Back then, she thought my calloused hands were sexy. Can you believe that crap? She used to trace the scars on my knuckles and tell me they proved I wasn't afraid of hard work. She'd brag to her friends about dating a real man who could fix anything and build her whatever she wanted. I was her blue-collar fantasy, her walk on the wild side before she settled down with some boring lawyer type. Except somewhere along the way, the fantasy wore off and reality started looking pretty damn ugly to her. The change didn't happen overnight. That would have been too easy. Instead, it was like watching a slow-motion car crash that takes 8 years to finally explode. First, it was little things. She stopped wearing the necklace I'd made her from reclaimed copper. She'd forget to mention office parties until after they happened. She started correcting my grammar at dinner parties like I was some project she was working on. "It's I saw, not I seen, honey," she'd say with that tight smile that made my teeth itch. People notice these things. People, as if I wasn't people. As if the clients who paid my bills and shook my hand weren't people. As if the guys on my crew who'd take a bullet for me weren't people. But I guess when you start swimming in the shallow end of the corporate pool, you forget that there's a whole ocean of real folks out there just trying to make an honest living. The real turning point came when she made senior counsel. Suddenly, I wasn't her charming blue-collar boyfriend anymore. I was the guy holding her back from her true potential, the guy whose work boots didn't belong at the partner's Christmas gala, the guy whose truck looked out of place at her firm's fancy restaurants. "You could try a little harder," she'd say when I'd show up to these things in my best shirt and cleanest jeans. Image matters in my world. Her world, not our world. Hers. The work friends started multiplying like rabbits. Bradley from mergers and acquisitions, Jennifer from corporate litigation, and of course, Dominic from the corner office with the view of the harbor and the ego to match. The guy was Dominic Castellano, 52, senior partner at her firm. Classic midlife crisis with a law degree, divorced twice, known for mentoring younger female lawyers. Word around town was that Dominic had a type, ambitious younger lawyers impressed by corner offices and expense accounts. He'd wine them, dine them, help their careers along, then move on to the next eager associate. Marissa had been having Thursday night mentoring sessions with him that turned into expensive dinners. $300 for 2 people at Romano's, not including wine. When I asked about it, she got defensive. "It's called networking, Dave. Dominic knows everyone in the city. These relationships matter." Oh, I bet they did. Especially the kind that required new lingerie and waxing parts of her body she hadn't paid attention to in years. I crashed with my buddy Marcus, who lived in a converted warehouse. When I pulled up with my truck bed full of garbage bags, Marcus was working on a 1973 Harley. He took one look at me, then at the bags, and just nodded, like he'd been expecting this for years. "Took you long enough," he said. I was starting to think you were going to let her walk all over you forever. His Wi-Fi password was literally Marissa Sucks. Changed it 6 months earlier when she acted snooty at his birthday party. Marcus made me promise 3 things. No moping, no drunk dialing, and absolutely no talking about getting her back. This is a recovery zone, not a pity party. So I disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally, socially, digitally. As far as Marissa was concerned, I became a ghost. Deleted social media, avoided usual hangouts, threw myself completely into work. The Kellerman project led to more contracts. Within a week, I'd signed deals that would keep me busy for the next year and put more money in my pocket than I'd made in the previous 2 years combined. Found a simple apartment above Thompson's Auto Supply on the industrial side of town. Nothing fancy, just 800 square feet of privacy. I furnished it with thrift store finds. Simple, functional, honest furniture that didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Kind of like me. Meanwhile, gossip trickled in through the small town network. Mike at the hardware store told me Marissa had been making the rounds at all the fancy places in town with Dominic, acting like the queen of the social scene, wearing enough jewelry to fund a small country. Tommy at the deli said his cousin, who worked catering, saw her at parties where people discussed wine pairings and vacation homes, acting like she'd been rich her whole life. But the most interesting intel came from Janet Morrison, whose husband worked at Marissa's firm. Dominic's been taking a lot of long lunches with the new associate, Jennifer Walsh, she said. And when I say long lunches, I mean 3 hours, coming back looking like they've been discussing more than legal briefs. Jennifer Walsh, young, ambitious, fresh out of Harvard Law, apparently Dominic's next project. Marissa doesn't know? I asked. Oh, she knows, Janet said. She's just pretending she doesn't. Image is everything in that office. Then, exactly 4 months after I loaded my life into garbage bags, my phone decided to have a seizure. I was on a ladder at a job site when it started buzzing like an angry hornet. The number made me do a double take. Marissa. I hit decline and went back to work, but the phone kept buzzing. By lunch break, I had 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a text thread that looked like someone had drunk dialed their therapist. The text started reasonable. Dave, I need to talk to you. Please call me back. Then desperate. Something's happened and I don't know who else to call. I made a mistake, okay? Finally, Crazy Town. You're being completely childish by ignoring me. 69 messages in total. The voicemails were a fascinating progression from desperation to anger to genuine panic. Buried in voicemail 15, she finally let truth slip. Things with Dominic didn't work out the way I thought they would. He's not the person I thought he was, and I don't have anywhere else to turn. And in text 43, I saw him with Jennifer Walsh at Romano's last night. They looked close, really close. The irony was beautiful. The woman who dumped her loyal husband because she deserved better had discovered that her better option was busy deserving someone else. I responded with exactly 3 words. You made choices, then blocked her number again. 2 days later, she showed up at my workshop, pounding on the door. I opened it and damn near didn't recognize her. This wasn't the polished lawyer who'd stood next to her upgrade. Hair in a messy ponytail, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under her eyes, cheekbones too sharp like she'd lost weight badly. I lost everything, Dave, she said, tears flowing. Dominic fired me. Said there was a conflict of interest, but everyone knows it's because Jennifer Walsh is his new whatever I was to him. I can't afford the house payments, and he made sure I'm blacklisted at every decent firm. I'm living in a studio apartment above a nail salon. The horror in her voice at that last part would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I made a mistake, she continued. A huge, terrible mistake. You were a good husband, and I threw it all away because I thought I deserved something better. For a moment, I almost felt something. Then I remembered the garbage bags, the smirk, the way she'd stood there like she was trading in a used car. You did make a mistake, I said. But the mistake wasn't leaving me. The mistake was thinking you could come back. Please, she whispered. I don't have anyone else. You had someone, I said quietly. Well, you had someone who would have done anything for you. You looked that person in the eye and told him he wasn't good enough. I stepped back and started closing the door. The answer is no, Marissa. You don't get to destroy something and then come back when you realize you needed it. That was 6 months ago. I used my success to buy a small cabin on 2 acres by a lake. The cabin needed work, but that was perfect. I had plenty of time to fix it up exactly how I wanted without justifying my choices to anyone. I saw her one last time at a grocery store months later. She looked ordinary, buying budget essentials, hair practical instead of stylish, clothes department store basic. For a split second, our eyes met. I saw recognition, maybe regret, but I felt nothing. She was just another stranger whose story had briefly intersected with mine. I nodded politely and drove away. Sitting on my porch that night, watching the sunset over the lake, I realized something. Marissa hadn't destroyed my life. She'd set it free. All those years trying to be good enough for someone who decided I wasn't. All that energy wasted on making someone happy, who was determined to be miserable. Gone, replaced with something infinitely better. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at someone. It's building a life so good that their absence becomes a blessing. Sometimes the trash really does take itself out. Best divorce settlement ever.
You forgot who built this house.
I built my company from nothing 25 years ago. Started in my garage with cut-up hands and a Torquay wrench, grew it from greasy sketches to national sales with 4 factories and 300 workers. My wife, my brother-in-law Rick, and my cousin Joel all had seats on the board because running it as a family felt smart back then. Spoiler, it wasn't. Last month they called a surprise board meeting. Between my second and third cup of stale coffee, they voted me out. No yelling, no last-minute talks, just the board's lawyer reading in a flat voice while the rest looked anywhere but at me. My wife, board member spouse, sat still, hands folded, like she was waiting for a spa appointment, not ending my life's work. They called it strategic misalignment. Said the company needed a younger, more digital CEO. Never mind I took it from a garage floor to national reach. Never mind they built nothing. Rick leaned back in that smug way he has, in a chair he only had because of me. Joel even winked when the vote came out unanimous. I nodded, thanked them for their honesty, and shook hands on the way out. Because that's what you do when wolves wear country club polos. Security walked me to the elevator. I even smiled at the clipboard guy. A wide smile, the kind that says something they can't read. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been ready for this for 3 years. While they did LinkedIn interviews and argued about golf course landscaping, I read tax code like thrillers. I set up a web of holding companies, one in Delaware, because Delaware, 2 in Wyoming, 1 in Panama, just to confuse anyone tracking ownership. Every time we raised funds or issued new shares, I let my stake shrink on paper. Let the family's shares grow. Rick got loud, Joel gave quotes, my wife switched from saying he to we when telling the origin story. I let it happen. I pushed it along. They never noticed I was moving voting rights to Cascade Equities, owned by an LLC called Kai Fall Ventures, hidden under a trustee who owed me more than cash. Buried in it all was a clause letting me take back control if the founder was forced out. They signed everything, every quarter. Joel once okayed a 42-page restructuring on his phone during a golf course call. Rick was too busy picking fights on LinkedIn. My wife had already begun talking like we were apart. We have different visions. He's better with early-stage stuff. I let them dream. I let them climb while I built the trapdoor. By the time they voted me out, public records said I had less than 10%. No veto, no power, no board seat. What they didn't know? I still held 48.6% of the company. Not in my name. Not in any way that would ping their systems, but in truth, I was still the king. Just wearing a mask. That night, I went to my garage. Same pegboard with screwdrivers shoved in at odd angles. Same cracked linoleum curling like dead leaves. My first blueprint, sketched on a diner napkin in a caffeine rush, still hung in a cheap Walmart frame. I opened the old filing cabinet, not the obvious one, the other one with the hidden false bottom my wife never knew about. Inside was a flash drive and a yellowed envelope marked "in case of treason" in my handwriting. I opened it slow, like cutting the right wire on a bomb. Inside was a password, long, ugly, impossible to memorize. Yet I still knew it. I pulled out an old laptop I'd built to stay offline, air-gapped, never touched by the company network. It wheezed to life, loading a bare desktop with one folder, failsafe protocol. Inside, 12 subfolders, each with dates, code names, and step-by-step instructions. I'd been building a shadow playbook for years. I clicked Daedalus legal structures, filings from Delaware, Wyoming, Cyprus, full maps of voting shares, clauses I'd slipped into contracts they signed without reading. Then the videos. 3 recordings from board meetings over the last 18 months. Not for blackmail, but to remind myself I wasn't paranoid. Rick grinning about staff pay cuts. Joel's throat clear before lying about quarterly numbers. I wasn't mourning. I was loading the plan. Then I made one call. Malcolm Glass. Just saying his name feels like a warning. Founder of Crooked River Capital, a hedge fund with the charm of a shark tank. 7 years ago, he tried to buy us, sent a crew with shiny words about synergy and agile scale. I told him to pound sand without even taking dinner, but I knew he'd still answer. One encrypted email from a burner account I hadn't touched in a decade. Interested in finishing what you started? He replied in 7 minutes. Call me. We talked after midnight. I was barefoot in my garage, spreadsheet open, burner phone to my ear. The bourbon was gone, my voice steady. I told him the exact percent Cascade Equities held, said I was ready to sign, But it had to happen overnight. Full transfer, no press, NDAs with teeth. He laughed like an old wolf catching the smell of blood. You're serious? After all these years, you're giving me the keys? You still want it? I want it. But this will cost you everything. Your name, your legacy. You know that. I glanced at the family photo above my breaker box. Me in the middle, Joel with his fake laugh, Rick holding a baby like a coffee mug, my wife looking at me like I was just a step to the next thing. They buried that legacy already. He went quiet just long enough to remind me why I respected him, even while hating him. I'll need proof of control rights, clean transfer docs, trigger clause language. You'll have it in 3 hours, all time-stamped. The trust is set. The board will wake up owning nothing but stationery. The midnight law office felt like walking into a vault. 23rd floor, lone receptionist with tired eyes and a badge that read Nathan. Down the hall, one lit office. Malcolm's guy had rented it for 6 hours, short-term, off the books, no digital trace. Inside sat 3 men, a lawyer, a notary, and one from Crooked River who called himself Tobias and didn't shake hands. Everything was ready. All 48.6% of my shares were split, bundled, and moved to DRK NXT Holdings, Malcolm's quiet jab at our old name, Next Horizon. I initialed the last page. The notary stamped it with a dull thud, like a coffin lid closing. I slid over the USB with override codes and shareholder control checks. Any rollback attempt without your key will trigger legal action, I told Tobias. Also, a copy of the family's private chat logs, including some colorful lines about minorities and shady tax moves, is in escrow. Tobias raised an eyebrow. You really covered everything. Wouldn't be here otherwise. By 3:20 a.m., I was home. At 4:45, Malcolm texted one word, confirmed. At 5:06, the server pushed the new board registry live. By sunrise, no one with my last name owned the company. 9:01 a.m. the next day, their world started falling apart. System access down, the CFO texted, thinking it was routine. 9:03, legal went to voicemail. IT guy who posted Monday cat gifs hadn't logged in. 9:05, Rick, fresh CEO, was ranting about Q3 when his dashboard kicked him mid-sentence. He clicked again. Permission denied. Please contact your administrator. He wasn't used to that. He thought he was the administrator. 9:07. Corporate lawyer Michelle skipped the front end and hit the shareholder registry. She froze. Her eyes scanned the screen like it was a foreign language. Cascade Equities, 0% Rick Meyer, 0% Joel Fine, 0% Crooked River Capital via DRK NXDT Holdings, 48.6% controlling interest, she whispered. Where did the shares go? 9:09, Slack channels blue. Up. Anyone else can't access inventory? Why does the admin portal say I'm a guest? Did we just get bought? 9:12. Joel called me 4 times. Left a shaky message. Hey, I think something's weird. Call me back. I didn't. 9:15. Malcolm's team dropped an internal press release. Short and lethal. Crooked River Capital had taken operational control, effective immediately. The emergency board meeting was pure poetry. 6 frantic people around a polished table covered in printouts, all showing red lockout screens. No coffee, no muffins, just panic and expensive clothes. 10:04. The main monitor lit up. Malcolm Glass appeared. New York skyline behind him. Black button down, no tie. Voice smooth as poison. Gentlemen, I'm pleased to finally be attending a board meeting of Next Horizon. I look forward to running this company better than you ever did. Rick tried to speak. Malcolm raised a finger like a priest giving last rites. You don't speak now. You listen. Joel slammed his fist. You can't just walk in and... I didn't walk in, Joel. You opened the door years ago. I just waited until you were stupid enough to push out the only man who knew where the foundation was laid. Michelle cleared her throat. These documents, this transfer, it can't possibly hold. There was no transparency. Malcolm tilted his head. Transparency? Like how you transparently buried the founder in a quarterly session. You signed off on restructuring 2 years ago. It's airtight. I should know. I paid your firm to audit it. Rick finally exploded. You think you can steal our company? We'll sue you into the ground. Malcolm didn't blink. And I'll countersue you into bankruptcy. That's the difference between me and your country club coup. I planned this. Their monitors updated. New board composition. Malcolm as chairman. 3 Crooked River executives as voting members. Rick's name gone. Joel pending review. My wife reduced to non-voting advisory. The silence was thick enough to strangle. This was a trap, Michelle muttered. No, Malcolm corrected, calm and precise. This was a will reading. And you just found out Daddy left it all to someone else. He ended the call. Screen went black. Michelle closed her laptop slowly. This isn't recoverable. They laid landmines 2 years ago. We just danced over them. Joel was first to go. Mutual separation, after Malcolm showed him discretionary spending irregularities. Didn't even pack his office, just left with a gym bag. Rick lasted 2 weeks before a 10-minute performance review deactivated his badge mid-lunch. The dominoes fell fast. Logo changed to NXT Glass Holdings. Chicago office shut after Q1. Atlanta didn't make Q2. Same buildings they'd bragged about scaling into new markets became liabilities with overdue rent. My wife filed for separation 3 weeks later. Not for love, for distance. She thought getting away from the blast radius might save her career. It didn't. Joel's second mortgage foreclosed. Rick's startup dissolved after angel investors pulled out. Cousin Stacy rebranded as a wellness consultant on LinkedIn, one of those bios screaming desperation wrapped in affirmations. Meanwhile, I bought a ridiculous espresso machine and named it Joel. It hissed like a dragon and steamed milk like a locomotive. Spent my days fishing, reading, rewiring my garage into a personal lab. Sometimes people in the industry reached out, cautious just checking in messages or heard you step down, any plans? I thanked them, said I was resting, recalibrating. But no one mentioned what really happened. Not out loud because they didn't have to. They knew, everyone knew. You could see it in the nervous side eyes at industry events, in the abrupt silence when my name came up, like I was the ghost of consequence, a man who'd been wronged and didn't scream, just erased. The beauty of it all was my silence was the message. I didn't leak anything, didn't trash anyone in the press, no op-eds, no vengeance speeches, just vacuum. And it ate them alive. Because when you betray a builder and he burns the blueprint before walking away, you're not left with nothing. You're left with what you built. And if it turns out you never built a damn thing, then all you really have is what you can sell. My wife showed up at the house just after 9 p.m. one night, 3 weeks after filing separation papers, headlights sweeping across the driveway like searchlights. She hesitated before getting out, still wore the same cream blazer from that board meeting, wrinkled now, hair pulled back but strands falling loose like her armor was failing piece by piece. She climbed the steps like they were heavier than she remembered. I opened the door before she could knock. For a long second, she didn't say anything, just stared at me like I was some artifact unearthed from a time capsule. You planned this, she said finally. No accusation in her voice, no bite, just quiet realization unraveling in real time. I looked at her. You voted yes. Her breath caught, barely noticeable, but I noticed. She stepped closer. I didn't know Rick told me it was just temporary, a restructure. I thought you'd be brought back after I learned my lesson? I said with sarcasm so sharp it cut the air between us. She winced. For a moment, I saw the cracks. Not guilt, not remorse, confusion. As if she couldn't compute that someone she underestimated could still surprise her. I gave 30 years to that company, I said quietly. Built it with my hands while you all rebranded it into cocktail party talking points. She looked down. I never wanted it to go this far. I leaned against the door frame. You didn't want it to go this far? Or you didn't think I could? That landed. I saw it. She tried to find something in her bag of tricks. Empathy, maybe. Memory. We built a life together. Remember the nights in the first office on that futon when we didn't even have payroll covered? We'd eat tuna from cans and write invoices by hand. Yeah, I remember, I finished. I remember doing that while you were texting your brothers about selling me out to venture capital 2 years later. Now she looked up, eyes wet. It wasn't like that. You were becoming isolated, paranoid. You didn't trust anyone. Because you were giving me reasons not to. She stepped forward. So this is revenge? You torched the family just to prove a point? No, I said. This isn't revenge. This is consequence. And then she broke. Tears came. Real ones. Maybe. Her voice cracked. You think I don't care? This didn't hurt me? I lost everything today. I looked her dead in the eye. You lost something you never earned. That was the moment her face hardened like glass turning to stone. Guilt had failed, so now came the second act. Fury. You always needed to be the hero, she snapped. You couldn't handle not being the center of gravity. That's what this is. But I didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't explain. I just let the silence stretch until it snapped. And then, without another word, I closed the door. She stood there for a few more seconds, maybe waiting for the handle to turn. It didn't. Behind the door, I leaned against the wall, not in relief, not in pain, just stillness. This was never just a business play. This was surgery, and some cuts bleed longer than others. The perfect ending came 6 weeks later at a venture capital party. Ballroom flooded with the usual suspects: venture capital hangers-on, slick founders, startup mascots in sneakers pretending to be billionaires. A jazz trio noodled in the corner like they were being paid not to be noticed. I stood near the bar, sipping a drink I didn't like but couldn't name, watching the crowd try to remember who they were without their LinkedIn titles. 6 weeks since the transfer, 6 weeks since I set a quiet fire no one could put out. For the first time in years, I didn't need to shake hands, didn't need to pitch, didn't need to matter. I'd already done what I came to do. I was halfway through my drink when I saw him. Michelle's boss, lead counsel for the family board, the same man who drafted the vote that forced me out. Now wearing a tux 2 sizes too tight and panic sweat too thin to hide, his eyes locked on mine like a deer spotting the edge of a cliff mid-sprint. He stumbled over. No intro, no hello. Just the look of a man haunted by math that didn't add up. You sold to Glass. I let the question hang in the air. Then I sipped my drink, one slow, deliberate motion, and said it quiet enough for just him to hear. At 9 a.m., I smiled. His face drained like someone had pulled the plug on his circulatory system. Sheet white, jaw slack. The lights in the ballroom danced behind him while he stood frozen, like the ghost of a man who realized the grave had been dug years before he ever picked up a shovel. I walked away without waiting for response. Some revenge is loud. It bellows. It shouts. It demands attention. But the most effective kind? It's silent, strategic, and absolutely irreversible. What I love about this story isn't the revenge itself. It's how it was done. This was a man who didn't beg, didn't lash out, didn't even yell. He just watched, waited, and pulled a single silent thread that unraveled everyone who underestimated him. There's something deeply satisfying in that kind of restraint. And terrifying, too. They thought they were wolves running the pack. Turns out they were sheep who forgot the shepherd had bigger teeth.